Hello everyone, it's Mr. Marsh here, and today I'm just going to be giving you a bit of a feedback session on, for this one, your creative writing from the exam. So the whole idea here is I'm going to sort of walk you through, have a little talk about what we did well, what I enjoyed, I've got some example things to show you as well, but I'm also, and kind of crucially, I'm going to go through some things that we need to do to work on just to improve for next time. Okay, so some targets to work towards. You should have in front of you your papers with your answers on, and you should have each for your Macbeth and the creative writing. You should have a feedback sheet that I've given you that will have some targets highlighted on. And on the right hand side next to that, there is space for some notes on the right hand side of the sheet. So I would like you, hopefully, you might need to write quite small, but I want you to try and fill it with some keynotes of things that I talk about today that you might want to incorporate next time you do your work. And I think everybody's got something at least to work on and think about how they can tweak it and get better. So that's what we're going to do. Let's have a look. So ideally, if you've got some coloured pens or highlighters, that'll be really useful because I'm going to want you to annotate on your answers as we go through. It'll be quite helpful, I think, as well for you to sort of see visually where you're doing some of these things. So if you can, or if you need to, pause me or whatever, scramble around, get some pens, some highlighters if you can. That'll be quite useful. Okay. Right. So just to be clear, you'll have two sets of marks which will equal a total of 40. There is a first mark out of 24. And that is basically for organisation and just the overall quality of the content, the overall feel of the piece, how effective it is. Then there's a mark out of 16. That mark is for technical accuracy, so that's your punctuation, your vocabulary choices, your spelling, that kind of thing. And overall, adding those two together, you get a mark out of 40, which would give you your total mark. So as we go through, I'll reference some of those bits, and I'll show you some clips of the mark scheme as well to hopefully help you understand why you've got the mark that you've got. All right. So first thing, what did we do well? There were some really enjoyable pieces. So some of you are using a fantastic range of vocab, really impressive. The ideas that you had to kind of begin were excellent. I think we've got a lot better at that than the last piece we did. Really kind of creative and interesting ways. Very few of us just beginning that really basic, there was a boy called, or there was a woman who did this, and actually starting in interesting, engaging ways that maybe give us questions and we wonder what's going to happen next, or that kind of thing, throwing us into the middle of the action. So really strong there. There's some really good examples of structural devices, and I'll come to that in the targets, but some of you are getting really clever at kind of shifting the pace or foreshadowing, hinting at things that to come as well, which scores you high in the structural marks. That was good. And some really engaging descriptions. Some of you got some very clever ways of kind of describing these kind of quite sinister, creepy places. So overall, some excellent examples in there. But I want to work on some of these things, and as I say, I want to give you some targets to improve. So first one in your notes, you can see at the top there, put number 1, vary sentence openings. Now this might not be you, but even if it's not, I still want you to put a note down this because I still think everybody can maybe take a little note of this. Sentences that begin kind of with pronouns or in this kind of relatively simplistic way, you can see in this list I've got here, I, the, it, he or she, they, we. They're just examples, but lots of you are beginning sentences with these kind of words. And there's nothing wrong with that. If it's every now and again, that's absolutely fine. I don't mean at all that you can never begin a sentence like that. But if your sentences always begin with one of those, then it becomes a little bit of a problem. And I'll explain why in a second. So what I'd like you to do first of all is just pause me now if you can this. Guys, and if you can just go through your work, have a look, and just highlight or circle anywhere that you think you're doing that in your sentences. How many times are you beginning with those kind of words? Just have a look and see percentage-wise, how many of your sentences you're doing that with. So pause me, have a look, come back when you're done. Okay. What you need to try and do then is to make sure you've got a nice range, a nice mixture of these kind of things. So we're going to try to use maybe adverbs or subclause openers to really add a bit more variety and interest to the piece. So, you can see on my example in this yellow box here, cautiously, comma, I did this, or whatever, I went here. Not wanting to appear afraid, comma, the man decided to, or with the hammer and sharp knife tucked away, comma, she. And therefore we're just beginning with a little bit more control and variety in our work. So as an example, let me just sort of draw you to something here. We want to take that further. We want to then be thinking about not just how we begin in an interesting way, but also how we make sure that our sentence types are varied. So varied openings, but also varied types of sentences. So your second point, if you want to just pause me and write that down, get this down in your notes, is a wider variety of sentence types. And again, I think this is something that everyone can take note of. Now, what we want is a real mix. If you can see below, have a look at this example. This is an example with lots of nice, interesting sentences. Sounds lovely. Have a listen. Right. Carefully, cautiously, he moved towards the gloomy gateway. With a shaking hand, he reached for the rusting gate, worn and crooked, to finally take the step he had feared for so long. Suddenly, he was shocked to hear an orchestra of groans, pained and contorted, swirling through the misty air. He knew now was the time to make his escape, or he would be forever trapped in the fog of despair. So, some good sinister sentences. Lots of multi-clausal sentences, lots of sub-clauses added in, carefully, cautiously, or with a shaking hand, comma. So these are lots of complex sentences, and that's great, but it's not varied enough. We can make it much better by mixing up our sentence types. Let me just draw your attention to the mark scheme here. This is the AO6, this is the technical accuracy, the mark out of 16. So you can see the top band here, then you've got the next band down, then level 2, and then level 1 down the bottom here. So if you look at this, it says use a full range, this is in the top band, use a full range of appropriate sentence forms for effect. So the third bullet point in this, on each of the bands, is discussing how well you use sentence forms. The second one here, 9 to 12 marks, uses a variety of sentence forms. Level 2 says attempts a variety of sentence forms, and down at the bottom, simple range of sentence forms. So you want to be really showing a real control and mixture in your work. Let me show you this in a little bit. So there's that example again that we've just looked at. And then we can prove this just by throwing in some short impact sentences. Carefully, cautiously, he moved towards the gloomy gateway. Full stop. Fear gripped him. With a shaking hand, he reached for the rusting gate. Now notice here I've changed these to hyphens. Worn and crooked, so this is a different sentence form. It's the same idea, I'm inserting the subclause with hyphen. To finally take the step he had feared for so long. Suddenly an orchestra of groans, pained and contorted, rang out from the deep in the misty air. It was then. So something sinister about that very short sentence is it was then, full stop. He knew now was the time to make his escape, or he'd be forever trapped in the fog of despair. He had to go, full stop, fast. So it's changing pace, it's adding drama by bringing in these short impact sentences. But combined with the long descriptive ones, it makes it really much more effective. Okay. Point number 3, and this is an important one about punctuation. So I've got 2 aspects to this, is accuracy and variety. Again, just make these notes in your box where you can. There's quite a few of you making full stop or comma errors. And this probably needs a whole session working on this to kind of really cement it. So I'll struggle to do it in just a quick summary. But ultimately, you've got to think about a main clause and a subclause. What a lot of you are doing is you're using subclauses as though they're full sentences. So the man walked down the road. It's got a subject and a verb and a noun. It's a full, complete sentence. The man walked down the road. Full stop, as the rain fell around him, doesn't work. As the rain fell around him is a subclause. That itself, the red bit there, is not a complete sentence. So that should be a comma. That should be these should be separated as main and subclause. They're not 2 main clauses, which is what a full stop does. So you'd rather have this: as the rain fell around him, comma, the man walked down the road. So yeah, just to be clear, that's something that you want to be considering how we're thinking about. So if I can ask you, just for the moment, just to pause, please, go through your work and just with a second look, a proper reflection, because sometimes I feel that people make these mistakes and it's more because Not that we didn't know how to do it, but just we've kind of skimmed over and not really thought. And just go through and can you correct, maybe in a coloured pen, can you correct your punctuation? Can you look and check, actually, should that be a full sentence? Or is that just a subclause? Should I be using a comma or a full stop? Just go through and check the accuracy of your work. Come back to me when you've done that. Okay, so the next thing then, I've got punctuation accuracy is important, and again, maybe we'll look at that in a session in September, making sure we get that absolutely right. The full stop comma accuracy is the foundation which everything else is built on. But what you also need is variety, and I'll show you this in the mark scheme. Semicolons, colons, hyphens, brackets, exclamation marks, these are all other forms of punctuation that you can bring into your work, and you should be doing at GCSE level. Most of you don't use them at all. Some of you are using them a little bit, but maybe not always accurately, but that's still good. And then one or two of you are managing to do it really effectively. So what I'd like to do, just pause me again now, and I'm just going to have a quick conversation with the person next to you. Do you actually know how to use each of these things? So just pause it, have a little chat as a class. How do you use a colon? How do you use each of these? When would you incorporate them in your work? Come back to me when you're done. Okay. Again, it's probably going to be a punctuation session that I'll do in September, and we'll kind of do some real tasks and work on making sure we feel confident and comfortable with these. But getting familiar with them isn't that difficult. It's something you can easily find out with a little Google search, watch a little video on them. You could quickly figure out how to use these things at what point they're needed. And it's important that we do. So again, here's your mark scheme again on these 16 marks, top of the band and so on. If you look at the second bullet point in each box, it's talking about punctuation. The very top, wide range of punctuation is used with a high level of accuracy. So to get in this top band, you need to be using the full wide range accurately. If you go down, it says a range of punctuation is used. Most of the success, that's for the next set of marks, 9 to 12. Some control of a range of punctuation, lower down, 5 to 8 marks. 1 to 4, some evidence of conscious punctuation. So if you're not fully correctly punctuating, you're going to find yourself down this bottom end in the mark out of 16. Okay, so something to take note of. Right. Number 4. Okay, you see this bit at the top in the red? If you want to write this down, create a sensory world. Okay, so one of the things was at times some of us were drifting into telling the events and not really focused on painting a picture for the reader. Now, as an examiner reading it, or if I was, just a reader trying to enjoy a piece of work, if I can't visualize, if I can't really get a sense of the place you're describing, it becomes really difficult for me to be able to visualize the world. I need to be able to draw on and rely on, like anybody does, the 5 senses. If I close my eyes and try to imagine something, I can imagine through sight, sounds, smells, textures, things that I've experienced before. So as a writer, you've got to bring that to life. And crucially, one of the best ways to do this is through using simile and metaphor, personification, those kind of ideas, to imaginatively bring the world and the characters to life. And some of us aren't quite doing that. Some of you are drifting into kind of just telling us something, then he went here, then this happened, then he did this, and it becomes a list of events. So again, just pause me for now, and go through and just have a look. How many times can you highlight in your piece of work where you're using the 5 senses maybe, where you're using similes and metaphor to really try and make this an imaginative piece of work. So pause it, highlight, pick out, come back to me when you've done that. Okay. Again, I just want to show you the importance of this then. Hopefully you've checked in your work if you're doing that. And if you look here on the mark scheme, this is the top end of the 24 marks. This is not the 16, this is your overall effect. And you can see the third bullet point says extensive and ambitious vocabulary with sustained crafting of linguistic devices. Basically, how you've been really creative with your words and your ideas, linguistic devices like similes and metaphors, and making it imaginative and interesting. Okay, just examples here from some pieces of work. Now, I think this is actually from somebody's in the last piece of creative writing that we did. Because unfortunately I handed all your work back, I gave your work back to Miss and I forgot to take photographs of the good examples. So this might be an older one, it may even be yours, but have a look. This is nicely written. I'm going to run out of time actually, so I'm going to pause this here and I will pick this up on video 2.